What's up, everybody? So I want to talk to you today about the word perfidy. It's a term I recently came across and had never really heard before, but as I began to study the term and what it means, it kind of brought a lot of things into light and helped me to make a lot of sense of what was going on, at least in certain instances. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to read from you from dictionary.com the definition of perfidy, spelled PERFIDY. Look it up yourself. So perfidy is a noun. Plural form is perfidies. Definition 1: deliberate breach of faith or trust, faithlessness, treachery. Perfidy that goes unpunished in italicized. Definition 2: an act or instance of faithlessness or treachery. Now, what I want to draw your attention to, and if I'm pretty sure a while ago I posted the emails from Donald Mason regarding the noise issues there in the area, and his response when hiring Doug Murray, the new public safety director for the area, claimed that he was going to make it a point to make sure that Doug Murray was going to handle the situation according to the law. And so at the time, I felt rest assured that the public servants were following the law, and that Donald Mason was going to make sure that his employees, the public servants for the city, were going to follow the law and investigate the noise and so on and so forth. But what happened, instead of them doing that immediately, right off the bat, after the email from Donald Mason regarding Doug Murray being hired and supposedly making it a point to address the noise issue, went from that to Doug Murray essentially threatening me. And I can only guess that based on Doug Murray's response, that was the intention that Donald Mason had for him to, perform those certain actions in that manner against me. But of course, Donald Mason isn't going to say that because he's a good politician. He's going to try to save face and make it seem like he's helping. But by doing so, isn't that a deliberate breach of faith and trust? Making me think I can trust him to do the right thing, and then he turns around and sicks his dogs on me, so to speak, for lack of better terms. And next thing I know, Doug Murray and the police department are attacking me instead of investigating the noise. So that, to me, seems like a deliberate breach of faith or trust and treachery. So we're going to read a couple more definitions here. As much as it goes against my liking, I will give you the definition from Wikipedia. Perfidy from Wikipedia. It says, in the context of war, perfidy is a form of deception in which one side promises to act in good faith, such as by raising a flag of truce, with the intention of breaking that promise once the unsuspected enemy is exposed, such as by coming out of cover to take the surrendering prisoners into custody. Perfidy constitutes a breach of the laws of war, and so is a war crime, as it degrades the protections and mutual restraints developed in the interest of all parties, combatants and civilians. And it references the Geneva Convention, Article 37, Prohibition of Perfidy. Section 1, it is prohibited to kill, injure, or capture an adversary by resort to perfidy. Acts inviting the confidence of an adversary to lead him to believe that he is entitled to or is obliged to accord protection under the rules of international law applicable in armed conflict, with the intent to betray that confidence, shall constitute perfidy. The following acts are examples of perfidy: the feigning of an intent to negotiate under a flag of truce or of a surrender, the feigning of an incapacitation by wounds or sickness, the feigning of civilian non-combatant status, and the feigning of protected status by use of signs, emblems, or uniforms of the United Nations or of neutral or other states not parties to the conflict. Ruses of war are not prohibited, Such ruses are acts that are intended to mislead an adversary or to induce him to act recklessly, but which infringe no rule of international law applicable in armed conflict, and which are not perfidious because they do not invite the confidence of an adversary with respect to protection under the law. The following are examples of such ruses: the use of camouflage, decoys, mock operations, and misinformation. Article 38. Recognized emblems. It is prohibited to make improper use of the distinctive emblem of the Red Cross, Red Crescent, a red lion, or sun, or other emblems, signs, or signals provided by the conventions or by this protocol. It is also prohibited to misuse deliberately in an armed conflict other internationally recognized protective signs, emblems, signs, or signals, including the flag of truce and the protective emblem of cultural property. 2. It is prohibited to make use of the distinctive emblem of the United Nations, except as authorized by that organization. And Article 39, emblems of nationality. It is prohibited to make use in an armed conflict of the flags or the military emblems, insignia, or uniforms of neutral or other states not parties to the conflict. It is prohibited to make use of the flags or military emblems, insignia, or uniforms of adverse parties while engaging in attacks, or to shield, favor, protect, or impede military operations. 3. Nothing in this article or in Article 37, paragraph 1, section D, shall affect the existing generally recognized rules of international law applicable to espionage or to the use of flags in the conduct of armed conflict at sea. So that's according to the Geneva Convention. Next, and last but not least, for today, I'm going to read from United States Code. 10 U.S.C. 950T as in Tango. Crimes triable by military commission. And if you scroll down to section 17 of that particular code, it says, using treachery or perfidy. Any person subject to this chapter who, after inviting the confidence or belief of one or more persons that they were entitled to or obliged to accord protection under the law of war, intentionally makes use of that confidence or belief in killing, injuring, or capturing such person or persons shall be punished, if death results to one or more of the victims by death or such other punishment as a military commission under this chapter may direct, and if death does not result to any of the victims by such punishment other than death as a military commission under this chapter may direct. I'm going to go back up to the top real quick, because it mentioned there, any person subject to this chapter who. That was the first sentence, first part of the first sentence of section 17. So let's go back up to the top. And read this first couple of sections here. So, from the beginning, the following offenses shall be triable by military commission under this chapter at any time without limitation. Any person subject to this chapter who intentionally kills one or more of the protected persons shall be punished by death or such other punishment as the military commission under this chapter may direct. Attacking civilians. Any person subject to this chapter who intentionally engages in an attack upon a civilian population as such, or individual civilians not taking active part in hostilities, shall be punished if death results to one or more of the victims by death or such other punishment as a military commission under this chapter may direct, and if death does not result to any of the victims by such punishment other than death as a military commission under this chapter may direct. 3. Attacking civilian objects. Any person subject to this chapter who intentionally engages in an attack upon a civilian object that is not a military objective shall be punished as a military commission under this chapter may direct. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to Title 10, and I'm going to go to Subtitle A. And let's see, I think it's in Part 2. I'll come back to that. I can't recall. I didn't note exactly what section. I'll come back and break that down a little bit further as far as Title 10 of U.S. Code, and breaking down exactly who that code is pertaining to, or if it applies. So there you have it. It mentions not only in the general definition of the word or term, it describes the actions, it describes the term and the situations regarding that term, according to the Geneva Convention, and the fact that it's a prohibited practice, it's not allowed, and as well as in the U.S. Code, where it discusses the use of perfidy. Now, here's the thing. Another instance of perfidy is the state, and I guess I could be a little bit off on this example, but from my perspective, it would seem that another example of perfidy would be the state authorizing the use of cannabis only for that use, so-called authorized use, to be used against me in a way to punish me for that use. But interestingly enough, no one from the court, to my knowledge, had reported anything to the Ohio Board of Pharmacy or to the Ohio Medical Marijuana Control Program, or to anyone, even the doctor, regarding this false allegation of me supposedly, what Michael Hughes claimed, that I was smoking marijuana. And at the time, when I was using the authorized medication, I was using it according to the allowed or acceptable uses. So what that means is I was using what's called a dry vape, or a dry vaporizer, which essentially heats up the plant material and turns it into a vapor, or pulls the vapors out of the plant material for that to be inhaled. So it doesn't use combustion like smoking would. It uses an element that heats up to a point that it doesn't combust the material, but it turns the material, or the oils and so forth in the material, to vapors. Excuse me. So at the time, it didn't occur to me that they were misconstruing the idea that just because I had the THC in my biological systems, that they concluded that I must be smoking it. In fact, at one point, and I'm going to talk to my sister and see if I can get her on here. I'm going to interview her for what she had witnessed and experienced, that on one of the days that I was supposed to be released from jail due to all this fraudulent activity, my sister had traveled from Columbus to Zanesville to come pick me up and help me kind of get back on my feet and kind of get things situated and so forth. But they didn't release me. So they let her believe that I was going to be released. They let me believe I was going to be released to get ready for the trial. But what ended up happening is because of the length of time that I had been using cannabis and the way that it stores in the body, it stores in the fat cells, or the fatty cells of the body. And so over a prolonged period of use, the body tends to store up quite a bit of the THC material in the fatty cells. And so for someone who has a low metabolism and high usage, or I should say a long period of usage, the THC can stay in the system for quite some time, upwards of 30 to 45 days, sometimes even longer, depending on the being's metabolism and how quickly their body metabolizes the material out of their body. Now, these people are so incompetent and apparently unhinged that they just assumed that I was smoking it And at one point, they had made an allegation to my sister when she was waiting to pick me up outside the building, that because of the fact I still had THC in my system, they were accusing me of smoking cannabis in the jail. So, I mean, quite frankly, that's more of an admission of their own character than mine, when they're so stupid that they don't realize that for someone that has a long period of usage as well as a low metabolism, it takes a lot longer for the materials or the trace elements to be removed from the biological systems. So what they did is they used that against me, and you may have heard a little bit about this in the past recordings and so forth. But so they used it against me to keep me in jail for roughly 2 weeks after I was supposed to be released, something like that. Excuse me, give or take. So they use it against me in a manner that to this day I can't use the medication any longer because of what they did, and making me fear for the repercussions of using the medication even though it's authorized. They have effectively destroyed my ability to utilize that medication to mitigate my pain and suffering and discomfort. And so now, because of the fact that I transitioned away from pharmaceuticals to cannabis to get away from pharmaceuticals because of the damage that the prescriptions were causing, the overprescriptions and so forth from the providers, I decided to take my health into my own hands and move away from pharmaceuticals and use strictly cannabis as a medication to mitigate some of the pain and suffering that I was dealing with and still am. But unfortunately now I can't use the cannabis any longer because of this, because it creates such paranoia and anxiety when I do use it. And even when I'm not using it, just knowing that it could be in my systems and be held against me, even though it's authorized by the state, when certain quote-unquote law enforcement officers lie and make up stories to their benefit. And not only that, they, of course, held me in jail longer, which prevented me from preparing for the trial, which added to the trauma, added to the treachery, and making it to where I didn't know who or what I could trust, and essentially I was along for the ride. So at that point, they took control of everything, and I really had no hopes of winning the case, because these people are master manipulators and manipulate the situation to their favor at every turn, just like bullies on a schoolyard. Bullying a new kid on the block. So, yeah, looking back on it now, they never reported it to the state, so they punished me for it, they tortured me for it, but they didn't bother reporting it to the state or the Board of Pharmacy. So it's safe to presume now, based on the fact that Michael Hughes doesn't know what an affidavit is, or is willing to knowingly pass fraudulent affidavits and conduct himself in that manner, then it's reasonable to see that they basically were lying, because of the fact, not only that I know I wasn't doing what they said I was doing, but number two, they never reported it to the state. So if they were that certain and had rock solid proof and evidence of their claim against me, then most likely they would have reported it to the state, and that would have at some point affected my ability to keep that relationship with the state to access the cannabis. But they didn't do that. They didn't bother reporting it to the state, and the state never asked me about it. No representatives ever brought it up. Nobody reached out to me. Nobody emailed me and asked me about it. Not even the doctor that I go to was aware of it until I had brought it up to him. So that shows me that they have something to hide. Because if I was really that bad of a person, if I was really a criminal, and they're going to hold me in jail for roughly 2 weeks after I was supposed to get out because I had the THC in my system due to my authorized use, I would think that they would report that to the state to prevent me from having access to the products. Because if what they were saying was true, then I was essentially breaking the law, which not only would create an opportunity for them to create more charges, but then they also have an obligation to notify the state if that was really the case or the truth. But they didn't. And I've had access to the cannabis this whole time. There's never been an issue regarding that with the Board of Pharmacy or with the state. So it tells me that, number one, they didn't bother reporting it to the state, probably because it was 100% false. And if they were to report it to the state would have gotten involved and investigated, and that would have blown open the fraud that they were committing and perpetrating against me. And so to prevent that from happening and to save face and to essentially stave off any questions of immoral activity or perfidy, they didn't bother reporting it to the state. So, this is just another example of their dishonesty, of their treachery, because they're willing to use and essentially do anything to win, even if it means breaking the law. And looking back on it now, it really still just shocks and amazes me that they were willing to go through all of that effort and so many bad faith actors, public servants, working together to deprive me of my rights, from the city level on up to the county level, and those county representatives representing the state itself, so therefore implicating the state. So at this point, it's clear to me that this isn't just about making a few mistakes and needing to be corrected, whereas that's where I was coming from originally, that I wanted the mistakes to be corrected and I wanted them to be held accountable in a way that they would see the error of their ways. And so I was looking to hold them accountable financially, as I mentioned before. But then I came to realize at some point that what good does it do all of us if I take a payout and say, for example, as a condition of that settlement or payout, I am forced to, not disclose the information by signing an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement or something like that. So then the more I started to think about it, if that's how most of these situations like this end up, if they are actually resolved in any way, shape, or form for the victim, then well, I kind of lost my train of thought, but I think you get my point. These people are so unhinged. These people are so out of touch with reality that they don't even try to make sure that they're following the law. They're just winging it, and most of the time making the shit up because there is no accountability, especially from a state like Ohio, where the politicians have erased all the accountability and oversight and have claimed that it falls on the federal government. But when has that ever, been a good situation for the people? I mean, that's a somewhat serious and also a facetious question. Because from my perspective, in my opinion, it's never good to remove the checks and balances, the oversight, and the accountability from anyone. but especially gun-toting thugs and bootlickers that just want to attack people, and for whatever reason, whether they're different or don't look the same, or they don't think the same, or they're smarter, or whatever the situation might be. I can't necessarily answer for these people and why they did what they did, but I can take some guesses, due to the fact that they're that incompetent, that stupid to think that it's okay to do what they did, and to ignore the laws and oaths of office that bind them. I guess there's that, but I mean, at what point do these people look themselves in the mirror and ask themselves why they are so fucked up? The thing you have to ask yourself is, why is someone like Michael Hughes still working at the prosecutor's office? This is someone who's been caught red-handed passing counterfeit, fraudulent documents, using malicious prosecution and abusive process, from what I've seen firsthand. Willing to overlook malicious prosecution and abusive process to score another win for the county, for the prosecutor's office, so they can, look great, like they're some kind of hero for the county. But in reality, they're just attacking people. So these are just a few examples of what I'm referring to: the perfidy, the treachery, the faithlessness, the bad faith actions of these people perpetrating against me. Excuse me, in a manner to make me think that I could trust them. Because in a lot of the personal interactions that I had with these individuals, they would carry themselves in a manner that would come across as being, trustworthy and honest, but in, behind closed doors, they are as, crooked as the Great Wall of China. Thing isn't very straight. So, at this point, it's clear to me that the only way forward with this is having these people held accountable in a military tribunal. And so that's what I'm moving towards. I removed any thoughts of wanting to, get a payday or to be paid out, or, to be compensated for my time and the pain and suffering and the damages that they've caused to my life. At this point, I will count that as an investment if I see these people go to prison for their crimes, to be properly tried for their crimes, and because of the evidence, convicted and sentenced to prison appropriately and accordingly. That's the way I see it. Is my time, the suffering that I went through at the hands of these people, is an investment. It's my investment, my sweat equity, into seeing that these people are going to be held accountable. And that will be the payment for me. That will be the satisfaction that I'll get out of having to experience all of this at the hands of these bad faith actors, is knowing that they won't be able to do it to anybody else, and that they will be effectively held accountable according to the laws that bind them, and that are supposed to prevent them from doing this sort of thing. So, again, as I've said many other times, you owe it to yourself to know the truth and let the truth set you free. If people lead you to the truth and you choose not to pay attention to it, you can only blame yourself. Because if I lead a horse to water and it doesn't choose to drink the water and it dies of thirst, I don't feel sorry for that horse. I don't feel bad. I don't feel guilty. If anything, I may pity the horse a little bit because it was so stupid that it didn't drink the water and live. It chose its fate. So with these people, just like the horse, they have the choice. They can drink from the water and be renewed and hopefully live a better life and not treat people the way that they have, or they don't. And you know the rest of the story. So the choice is theirs. But regardless, they did what they did. The evidence is on the record. They can't controvert that. You know, that is a fact. As a matter of fact, something I'm going to be asking Wendy Sowers is when it came to light recently that the clerk of the courts is actually the individual who technically runs the courts, because they set the schedules for the courts and for the officials, for the so-called quote-unquote judges and the attorneys, prosecutors, public defenders or pretenders. You know, they set all of those schedules. And so essentially the clerk runs the court. And so based on my knowledge now, it would seem that the quote-unquote judge and the prosecutor actually are serving the clerk. And the clerk is in the hierarchy of the court at the top. And so one thing I plan to address with Wendy Sowers, the clerk, is in that particular case, CR 2021-0340, from Muskingum County Court of Common Pleas, with Kelly Cottrell heading up this hot soup sandwich. See, back in, it was beginning of July, I believe, of 2021, and or towards the end of June, beginning of July, somewhere in there, maybe around the 3rd, I think, something like that, of July, I had posted bail to get out. I came up with $2,500 cash to get out of jail so I could go take care of my animals, because they were starving and hadn't been let out of the house. They had defecated all over my house and were essentially dying because of the way I was forced to leave them in the house without having any access or having anybody to be able to go take care of them. No phone calls to be able to contact anybody to take care of them. So I, in my desperation to take care of my animals, I came up with the money to post bail to get out so I could take care of them. Well, in the process of all of this, supposedly there was a hearing that was scheduled, and I want to say it was scheduled supposedly for July 9th, is what they said after the fact. But there was nothing on the docket. And in fact, on the docket, if you look, it'll show that I actually went in to the court on the 9th. I think that was the day. It was the day that the supposed hearing was scheduled, even though it wasn't on the docket. So I went in and filed a notice of appearance with the clerk on that day. And I communicated with the clerk and inquired about the so-called hearing and asked if there was any hearings that were scheduled for that day for that case, CR 2021-0340. I was informed no. I looked on the docket and I didn't see anything there, and so I said, well, because I don't see anything on the docket and because the clerk is telling me that there's nothing on the schedule, I'm going to leave. And so I filed the notice of appearance and got my copy stamped, and then I left because there was nothing on the schedule. So, I mean, what purpose do I have to hang around the courthouse, once they're done with all the other cases? What am I supposed to, just pipe up in the middle of the courtroom and ask to have the hearing now, even though it's not on the schedule? It doesn't work that way. They're supposed to schedule it. They never did. You can see that on the docket. I've gone over this numerous times. So you see my notice of appearance. You don't see any hearing scheduled for that day. And then at some point, I'm not sure the exact date that they filed it, they filed the warrant for failure to appear. So ironically, I have a notice of appearance on the day that I filed at the courthouse of the day that they said that there was a supposed hearing that wasn't on the docket. So there's a notice of appearance for me appearing at the courthouse. There's no evidence of any hearing being scheduled. And then you'll see right after my notice of appearance, there's a failure to appear. So how can I fail to appear if there's evidence that I appeared, right? I mean, according to the story, not considering their terminologies, appearing like a ghost or something like that, or a dead entity, using that types of connotations. Just essentially, I'm not appearing like a premonition. I'm just saying that, hey, I showed up. So at the time, I was very ignorant about how the courts work and was trying to learn as much as I could. And so I simply filed the document, the notice of appearance, just to evidence that I was there. So that way they couldn't say that I wasn't there. But they did anyways. They said that I wasn't there even though there's evidence that I was there. And they said that I failed to appear to a hearing even though there's no hearing on the schedule. There's no evidence of any hearing on the schedule. So that, in fact, is another, from my perspective, situation or example of perfidy, where they allow me to go through these actions. They take my money. They steal my money from me, the $2,500 cash, for me to be able to be released, which I shouldn't have been held anyways. The case should have been thrown out had these people actually paid attention. At any given point in time, not to mention along through the trial, especially when the 3 incompetent quota hire dispatchers, these cunts, admitted that not only nobody got hurt or were injured or harmed, but I didn't actually prevent them from doing their job. They still did their job. So I got them to admit during my cross-examination that they lied. So that's on the record too, unless of course they, erased that or obfuscated that information. So the 3 quota hire dispatchers and the incompetent law director, David Tarbert. So there's Kaylee Hambrick, something like that, Stephanie Sheets, Kim Brown, and David Tarbert. They were the 4 witnesses. So we got 3 public servants, employees of the police department, dispatchers, glorified secretaries, and then we got the law director, David Tarbert, who apparently thinks that it's okay to create contracts with private individuals, or anyone for that matter, to prevent him from following the law or enforcing the law. Because what he did, unbeknownst to me, at some point, I can't remember the date of the letter that was entered in his evidence. He had sent out a letter, I guess certified mail return receipt, even though it was never properly delivered to the property, which was evidenced by the fact that return receipt card wasn't even signed or notated appropriately. It looked like someone else, possibly the postal carrier, had signed for it. So at that point, who knows what they did with that letter. But anyways, make a long story short, David Tarbert wrote a letter stating that he was revoking the privilege of calling the police department to make the complaints for me. Basically telling me that he was taking away my privilege of calling the police department, as if I was just calling, for courtesy, or as if I was calling just for entertainment purposes or something like that. I'm not quite sure, the reasoning in his feeble little mind behind that letter, other than trying to obfuscate and, shirk his responsibilities and, not actually do what he was supposed to do. But the court and these incompetent jury members, because, obviously they have no idea what the hell's going on. They have no idea what the law is even. All they hear is, well, look, the law director revoked his privilege, so therefore he wasn't allowed to call anymore. Well, it doesn't say anywhere in the law that any public servant's allowed to revoke my ability to complain about crimes being committed. And yes, disturbance of the peace is a crime. So looking back on it now, there's multiple situations where they utilized a form of perfidy, of treachery, of faithlessness, of breach of trust to make me think that they were going to do the right thing, but then they turn around and do the opposite. And so that tends to create a situation not only of traumatic experiences, but the multiple traumatic experiences compounded on top of each other tends to have a very psychological effect negatively on the man or woman that it's being perpetrated on. And obviously to different varying degrees, depending on the individual and their intelligence level and their ability to deal with bullshit. So at this point, my goal is to see these people in prison. I've given up any thoughts or ideas of, extravagant paydays or anything like that because of what I've had to endure. Now, my compensation will be seeing these people arrested, or knowing, if I don't get to see it firsthand, that these people are arrested and are going to be tried for their crimes and will be potentially in prison for the rest of their life, and or potentially, depending on what the outcome is, face the death penalty as a result of their crimes. Whichever the case may be, or the situation may be, I want to see these people held accountable, and I want to see these people get a taste of their own medicine. Quite frankly, I think some of these people, if not a lot of these people that are operating incorrectly as public servants, need to be made an example out of. So that way other public servants get a clue that they shouldn't be operating this way, that they should know what the laws state and what their obligations are and what their oath of office is. And if they don't want to follow that, then they can either step down or they can go to jail for an indeterminate amount of time, because it's tantamount to treason from my perspective. Because of what I see them doing in these courts, they're no longer judicial courts. It no longer has anything to do with the law. It has everything to do with them forcing private contract, whether on the side of the road or in the court itself, forcing people to submit to contracts for the court to be able to profit from. Because just like in my situation that I dealt with, I was punished for essentially doing the right thing. And let me rephrase that. The trauma that they were creating in my life was weaponized against me and used in a manner to disparage me and to prevent me from being able to defend myself appropriately and to learn the actual process of the court. Because they do a really good job of manipulation and obfuscation. And this is part of the reason I had such a big problem in the beginning, because I had an idea. I had like the Perry Mason, the TV example of how courts operate based on when I was a child and the shows that I was watching, like Perry Mason with my grandfather, thinking that that's how the courts operated. And then thinking that, it should be no problem for me to establish the facts and the truth and the law and have these people back down and back away and go away, do their jobs, stop bothering me. But unfortunately, I came to find out firsthand that it has nothing to do with the law or justice, and has everything to do with them forcing private contracts. So that way they can create securities, and they can sell those securities on the open market for profit. If they didn't put guns in my face and didn't threaten to kill me if I didn't comply, they would have not gotten away with anything that they did. And looking back on it now, I should have just stood my ground. But because of self-preservation, I chose to, handle it differently. Because ultimately, like I said before, all I wanted was peace and quiet. I didn't want all this. I didn't want to go through all this. I didn't want to have to deal with all this shit. I just wanted peace and quiet at my property. And I wanted the people who were responsible to address it and deal with it to address it and deal with it. And be done. Go on about my business and live my life. But they had a different idea, obviously. So think about it. Look up the terms yourself. Perfidy. You can look it up. As according to the Geneva Convention, Merriam-Webster Dictionary. You can look up the term according to the Black's Law Dictionary. There's a little bit subtle variations of the term, the definitions of the term, but essentially they're all pretty much the same. And so you can look up those definitions and you can see how they apply. You can look up in the Geneva Convention where it talks about that, as I read, and you can read further if you'd like, as well as the U.S. Code, where it refers there to perfidy and the prohibition of using perfidy, or the what's the term? I can't think of the word. Anyways, you can read it there yourself. And then if you know any of the situation that I've dealt with, you can then begin to apply those ideas to the situation and see for yourself what I'm talking about. Because I don't expect you to take my word for it. I certainly hope you don't. If you do, frankly, you're just an idiot. But if you look up the information yourself, you'll see that what I'm saying is true. Based on these definitions, based on the words that they use, the terms that they use, that are accepted. I'm not making this stuff up. I'm simply telling you what I'm reading. So, with that being said, it amazes me that I still occasionally have people on here making, rude comments and, using terms like sovereign citizen and that sort of thing. Not a whole lot, just an occasional here or there. Usually on the older postings, because they don't like to post on the newer ones, because they don't want anybody to see their stupid comments. They just want to try to, get under my skin and create a little bit of an argument or a friction for whatever reason, in the comment section. But it really shows you how stupid they are, because, what is that really going to achieve? If anything, I'm going to laugh at these people. I might fire back a smart-ass comment, but essentially they didn't have any effect one way or the other. They just wasted their time and they wasted mine, but, at least I found a way to entertain myself out of it. So, I want you to think about these things. I want you to think about the recent developments going on, at least as far as what's going on in the federal government, according to the story, if it's even true. But with all the corruption and lawlessness and out-of-control public servants at many different levels. And then if you consider what a lot of these counties are doing to veterans, I came across some stories about veterans being attacked by the ATF and other possibly federal organizations that viewed them as criminals for doing nothing wrong. There's one individual who had a piece of metal, which was in the shape of like a credit card, was not an animate object, could not function as anything else other than just a piece of metal that would lay on a table or something. It was not functioning as any type of, anything for that matter, but the ATF considered this this metal card as a machine gun. something that is incapable of firing a projectile is practically incapable of becoming a weapon itself. I guess it's a piece of metal and it's, roughly the size of a credit card. So I guess somebody could throw it, but I don't think it's lethal. But that would only be essentially one shot, right? If you could throw it, you could only throw it once, unless you go and retrieve it and throw it again. But the ATF somehow in their brain damage considered this little piece of metal a machine gun. And what's even more disturbing than that is the fact that there was a jury that convicted a veteran. And actually, I'm coming to find out there might be multiple veterans that have gone through this, that have been convicted for having a piece of metal that at one point was deemed okay by the ATF, but then at some point, for some arbitrary reason, they decided it wasn't okay. And instead of properly notifying people and going through the proper due process, they just use it as an excuse to, I guess, go after veterans and people who either had these pieces of metal that they considered, that the ATF considered machine guns. I mean, this is just absolutely absurd. It would be like having a metal shelf bracket to hang a shelf on a wall, and because it's L-shaped, the ATF is going to say that it's a machine gun. I mean, that's how stupid these people are, and not to mention the fact that the juries, these people serving on these juries, are so fucking stupid that they think that it's true. They side with the out-of-control public servants, the ATF, that characterizes a inanimate, innocuous piece of metal as a machine gun, when the damn thing can't even fire a projectile, has no firing pin, has no moving parts. It's just a piece of metal. But they want to call this piece of metal that has no moving parts a machine gun. So by its very definition, on its face, it's fraud. But these people, these jurors, these people that, well, let's be honest with ourselves. People that serve on juries are voters. That's how they get picked to serve on as a juror on a jury. They go through the voter registrations for the county, and they randomly, supposedly, pick registered voters to serve as a jury member. So that in and of itself is pretty telling, because we have people that are playing in a biased system that they're essentially giving their opinion by voting, thinking that that vote or that opinion makes any difference whatsoever on who actually gets elected. So these people are delusional on its face, on their face, because they vote. So when you have someone that's that delusional that they think that their vote matters, and then they serve on a jury in a quote-unquote court of law or court of justice, and they're so delusional that they think their vote matters, and they think that they pick who the president is, they pick whatever, they think that their votes matter. They don't know the law whatsoever, and yet they're manipulated very easily, by the way, because of their stupidity and their willingness to believe delusional ideas, to side with the court. And as I said before, it's not a surprise. They're getting paid to be there. So when I was standing in that court, I was the only one that wasn't getting paid to be there. I was there to protect my life and my property and my pursuit of happiness and my liberty. But all of these bad faith actors getting paid to be there were all working together to conspire to deprive me of those rights in a way to obfuscate and prevent them from having to fulfill their duties and obligations outlined according to the law and to their oath of office and so forth. So as you see, there's many examples, and as I stated a moment ago, I've become aware recently that Muskingum County, Zanesville, Ohio, isn't the only place that this is happening. There are many places across the country that this sort of thing is happening where veterans are being attacked. Whether it's the federal government or the local government, either way, the outcome is still the same. The veterans get attacked, the veteran gets put in jail, the veteran has his rights stripped from him, the veteran gets his property taken from him. Has his future destroyed, his or her future destroyed, mostly his. Because it seems to me in the stories and reports that I'm getting that this is mostly men, male veterans that are being treated this way. I haven't come across any stories yet about any female veterans being treated this way. So I'm not saying that they're not, I haven't been made privy to it, and I haven't come across any of those stories yet. So if there are, by all means, leave a comment, in the comment section and let me know of a situation. Leave maybe a name, case number, date, area that it happened in. If you know of a female veteran that may have gone through something similar, just so I can be aware. Because like I said, I'm not aware of any, as of to this point right now. So. Other than that, if you don't have anything good to say, then don't say anything at all, I guess. If you want to leave a comment and, be encouraging, please do so. I could use some encouragement. I enjoy encouragement as much as I enjoy encouraging other people. So if you feel it in your heart to, leave some encouragement, by all means, leave a comment. Let me know, what you think and, how you might support the situation. Let me know your opinion if you agree with me, and or if you have maybe a little bit different perspective on something and want to elaborate. By all means. This isn't just a situation for me to just sit here and bitch and complain. I'm attempting to get the information out there for other people to realize what's going on, so they can hopefully prevent themselves or maybe some loved ones of theirs to from going through something like this unnecessarily, because it's ridiculous. So again, if you feel like leaving a comment, please do. Like and share this video with your friends and family, and if you have any questions, feel free to leave in the comments.